The words hung in the air like poison on Mother's Day morning. My daughter Isabella stood in my doorway, designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor I'd polished just hours before. Her lips curled into that familiar sneer, the one she'd perfected over the years, the one that could cut deeper than any knife. I looked at her standing there in her silk dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, holding a wilted bouquet that looked like it had been grabbed from a gas station clearance bin. Behind her, Jason, her husband, leaned against the doorframe with that smug grin plastered across his face. The same grin he wore every time he asked me to sign another check. My hands didn't shake. They never do anymore. "Happy Mother's Day, Maggie," Isabella said, dropping my first name like it was something dirty she needed to spit out. Not Mom. Not Mother. Just Maggie. Like I was some stranger she barely tolerated. I took the sad flowers from her hand without a word. 23 years I'd raised this woman. 23 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of giving up everything so she could have the world. And this is what I got. A handful of dying roses and an insult served with a smile. "You really outdid yourself this year," Jason chuckled, adjusting his expensive watch, the one I'd unknowingly paid for through their endless business investments. "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story." I set the flowers down on the entrance table and walked slowly to the dining room. My bones ached. 72 years of life will do that to you, but I moved with purpose. Behind me, I heard Isabella whisper something to Jason. They probably thought I couldn't hear. Old age makes people assume you're deaf along with being foolish. But I heard everything. I'd been hearing everything for years. "She looks pathetic," Isabella hissed. "Just standing there like always. God, I can't believe we have to do this every year." "It'll be over soon," Jason muttered back. "Just smile, play nice, and we'll be gone in an hour." Play nice. As if this was some performance they had to endure. As if I was the burden in their perfect little life. I reached the dining table and pulled out a chair. The golden envelope sat exactly where I'd placed it that morning, gleaming under the chandelier light. I'd been planning this moment for months, calculating, preparing, making sure every detail was perfect. Quiet women like me don't act rashly. We wait. We watch. And when the time comes, we strike with precision. Isabella and Jason followed me into the room, still wearing those masks they thought I couldn't see through. She sat down across from me, crossing her legs like she owned the place. Technically, she thought she would own it one day. That was the plan, wasn't it? Wait for old Maggie to die, inherit the estate, and live happily ever after on my bones. So Jason started, leaning back in his chair with false casualness. "We actually wanted to talk to you about something today." Of course they did. There was always something. Another investment opportunity. Another loan they'd never repay. Another way to drain me dry while pretending they cared. "The company needs a small capital injection," he continued, his voice smooth as oil. "Just temporary, of course. Things are about to explode for us, Maggie. This is the breakthrough we've been waiting for." Isabella nodded eagerly, her eyes glittering with greed disguised as hope. Maggie, this could set us up for life. 4 generations. Isn't that what you always wanted? For me to succeed." I let the silence stretch between us. Let them squirm just a little. Jason's smile faltered at the edges. Isabella's fingers drummed against the table, a nervous habit she'd never been able to break. Then I reached for the golden envelope. "Before we discuss your future," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I think we need to talk about the truth." I slid the envelope across the polished wood surface. It moved slowly, deliberately, coming to rest right in front of Jason. His eyes dropped to it, confusion flickering across his face. "What's this?" he asked, trying to maintain that casual tone. "Open it." Isabella leaned forward, her curiosity getting the better of her caution. "What is this, some kind of gift? Are you finally—" "Open it," I repeated, looking directly at Jason now. He picked up the envelope, his fingers careful, almost suspicious. The paper tore easily under his touch. I watched his face as he pulled out the first document. Watched the confusion turn to recognition. Watched the recognition turn to disbelief. Watched the disbelief turn to pure, undiluted panic. Bank statements. Foreclosure notices. Transfer receipts with his forged signature. Evidence of every lie, every manipulation, every dollar they'd stolen while I played the fool. This can't be, Jason's voice cracked. The smooth-talking charm evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. His hands trembled as he shuffled through the papers, each one more damning than the last. Isabella grabbed some of the documents, her eyes scanning frantically. Her face went white. Actually white, like someone had drained all the blood from her body in an instant. Mother, what is this? Her voice came out small, childlike almost. The same voice she'd used when she was 5 years old and broke my favorite vase. Back when sorry still meant something. I folded my hands on the table, calm as a summer lake before a storm. Explain to your husband, I said, each word measured and precise, why your allowance is gone, why his parents are losing this house, and why your company is finished. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Jason shot to his feet, the chair scraping violently against the floor. You can't do this. This is real. I offered. Legal? Justice. Isabella's hands shook as she held the papers. You're lying. This has to be fake. You couldn't. I did. 2 simple words. That's all it took. Jason's face turned red, then purple. His fists clenched at his sides. Do you have any idea what you've done? Any idea at all? We have investors, obligations, people counting on us. People counting on my money, I corrected gently. My money that you took. My money that you spent. My money that funded your luxury while you called me a failure to my face. Isabella started crying, mascara running down her perfectly made-up face. But these weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who just realized the game was over and they'd lost. Please, she whispered. Please, you can't do this. I'm your daughter. Your only child. You can't just. I rose from my chair slowly, my arthritis making the movement deliberate. But there was power in that deliberation. Power in the calm. Power in the quiet that had been mistaken for weakness for far too long. Jason slammed his hands on the table, making Isabella jump. What do you want? Is this blackmail? Are you trying to control us? I picked up my purse from the side table and walked toward the door. At the threshold, I turned back to look at them. My daughter, sobbing over papers that spelled out her empire's collapse. My son-in-law, red-faced and furious, realizing that the old woman he'd manipulated wasn't as foolish as he thought. I don't want anything from you anymore, I said. I already took back what was mine. Wait. Isabella scrambled toward me, desperation making her movements clumsy. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. We need to figure out how to fix it. I asked, raising an eyebrow. How to convince me to save you one more time. How to squeeze just a little more blood from this stone. Jason grabbed the papers again, his eyes wild. This says the house is being repossessed. My parents' house. You involved my family in this. Your family involved themselves when they helped you forge my signature on loan documents, I replied calmly. The truth has a funny way of spreading, doesn't it? Isabella collapsed back into her chair, her perfect composure completely shattered. I don't understand. Why now? Why today? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, maybe for the last time. You called me a failure on Mother's Day. You handed me gas station flowers and thought I'd smile and take it like I always do. But congratulations, Isabella. You finally pushed me far enough to show you what failure actually looks like. The words hit her like a physical blow. Jason stood frozen, the papers still clutched in his white-knuckled grip. How long? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. How long have you been planning this? I smiled then. Really smiled. Not the polite, patient smile I'd worn for decades. This was something else entirely. Long enough to make sure there's no way out. Isabella's sobs echoed through the house as I walked out the front door. Behind me, I heard Jason's voice rising, panic making him loud and desperate. They'd probably spend the next few hours scrambling, calling lawyers, trying to find a loophole that didn't exist. But I'd learned something important over my 72 years on this earth. Revenge doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be violent or dramatic. Sometimes the quietest justice cuts the deepest. I got into my car and turned the key. Through the window, I could see Isabella in the doorway, mascara-stained face twisted in anguish. She was screaming something, but I couldn't hear it over the engine. And for the first time in years, I didn't want to. As I pulled away from the house, leaving chaos in my wake, one thought echoed through my mind. They thought my silence was permission. They thought my patience was weakness. They thought the quiet mother would never bite back. What happens when you discover the person who betrayed you the most needs you to survive, but saving them means destroying yourself? The miracle baby wasn't supposed to live. That's what the doctors told me after my third miscarriage. I was 41 years old, lying in a hospital bed with Leonard holding my hand, and some young doctor with tired eyes said the words that nearly broke me, "Mrs. Voss, your body just isn't meant for this." But I didn't believe him. Couldn't believe him. Because wanting something that badly, wanting someone that badly, it has to count for something, doesn't it? Leonard and I had been married for 15 years when Isabella finally came. 15 years of empty nurseries and baby clothes I couldn't bring myself to throw away. 15 years of watching other women push strollers past our house while I pretended it didn't tear me apart inside. "We have each other," Leonard would say, his voice gentle in the dark. "That's enough, Maggie. We're enough." But it wasn't. Not for me. There was this hole inside my chest that nothing could fill. Not Leonard's love, not our beautiful home, not the life we'd built together. I needed to be a mother the way some people need air. When I finally got pregnant at 43, I didn't tell anyone for 5 months. Didn't dare speak it out loud in case the universe was listening, and decided to take this one away too. I walked on eggshells, literally and figuratively. No lifting, no stress, no anything that might jinx it. Leonard caught me crying in the bathroom one night, my hands pressed against my growing belly. "What's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside me. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "What if I lose her too?" "Her." He smiled through his own tears. "You think it's a girl?" "I know it is." And I was right. Isabella Rose Voss came into the world on a Tuesday morning in April, screaming loud enough to wake the dead. The nurses placed her in my arms, and I looked down at this tiny perfect thing that I'd wanted so desperately, and I made a promise right then and there. I would give her everything. Everything I had, everything I was, everything I could possibly become. She would never want for anything, never feel unloved, never doubt for a single second that she was the most important thing in my entire world. Have you ever loved someone so much that you couldn't see you were destroying them with your devotion? Looking back now, I wonder if that was my first mistake. Isabella was a beautiful baby. People stopped us on the street just to comment on her thick dark hair and those enormous brown eyes. "She's going to be a heartbreaker," strangers would say, and I'd beam with pride like they'd just handed me an award. I dressed her in the finest clothes, little velvet dresses and patent leather shoes. Her nursery looked like something out of a magazine, all soft pinks and whites with a chandelier that cast rainbow lights across the ceiling. Leonard used to joke that our daughter lived better than most adults. But it wasn't a joke to me. It was love. Pure, unfiltered love. The years passed in a blur of ballet recitals and piano lessons and private tutors. Isabella was smart, brilliantly smart, but she was also learning something else. Something I didn't see happening right under my nose. She was learning that the world revolved around her. When she was 7, she threw a tantrum in a toy store because I wouldn't buy her a doll she already had at home. She screamed so loud that people stared, whispering behind their hands. I was mortified. But instead of teaching her that she couldn't always get what she wanted, I bought the doll. Bought 2, actually, just to stop the tears. Leonard pulled me aside that night. "Maggie, we need to talk about boundaries." "She's just a child," I said, defensive. "She'll outgrow it." "Will she?" His eyes held a warning I chose to ignore. "Or are we teaching her that throwing fits gets her what she wants?" I waved him off. What did he know? He wasn't the one who'd suffered through years of loss and grief to have her. He wasn't the one who understood what a miracle she was. By the time Isabella hit her teenage years, the cracks were starting to show. Not in her, in us. She'd roll her eyes when I asked about her day. Sigh heavily when I reminded her to call her grandmother. Lock herself in her room for hours, only emerging to ask for money or permission to go out. "It's normal teenage stuff," Leonard assured me. All kids go through this phase. But it felt different. Sharper. Like she was pulling away from me deliberately, building walls I couldn't climb. One afternoon when she was 15, I walked into her room to put away laundry and found her on the phone with a friend. She didn't hear me come in. "God, my mom is so embarrassing," she was saying. "She acts like I'm still 5. Always hovering, always asking questions. I literally can't breathe without her making it into some big dramatic thing." I stood there frozen, the laundry basket heavy in my arms. My daughter, my miracle, thought I was embarrassing. Thought I was suffocating her. I backed out of the room quietly, my heart cracking just a little. That night at dinner, I tried to act normal. Tried to be less, whatever it was Isabella thought I was being too much of. I asked only one question about her day. Didn't hover when she cleared her plate. Gave her space. She didn't even notice. The real turning point came when she was 17. She'd been dating this boy Marcus, for about 3 months. He was trouble, anyone with eyes could see it. Skipped school, smoked cigarettes behind the gym, had that look in his eyes that said he didn't care about anything or anyone. "I don't want you seeing him anymore," I told Isabella one evening. Her head snapped up from her phone. "Excuse me? Marcus. He's not good for you. I can tell." Isabella laughed, actually laughed, right in my face. "You don't even know him." "I know his type. I was young once too, Isabella. I know when a boy is." "When a boy is what?" She stood up, her voice rising. "When he's not good enough for your precious daughter. When he doesn't meet your impossible standards." "That's not what I—" "You know what your problem is, mother?" The word dripped with venom. "You're so desperate to control me that you can't stand the idea of me having my own life. My own choices. You'd keep me in a cage if you could, dress me up like one of those creepy dolls you collected when I was little." The words hit like punches. "I just want what's best for you." "No." Isabella stepped closer, her eyes hard. "You want me to need you. There's a difference." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sank into a chair, my whole body shaking. Leonard found me there an hour later, tears streaming down my face. "She hates me," I whispered. "She's 17, he said, wrapping his arms around me. "She doesn't hate you. She's just trying to figure out who she is." But it felt like hate. It felt like every sacrifice I'd made, every sleepless night I'd endured, every dream I'd put aside to make her life better, none of it mattered. None of it was enough. The Marcus situation resolved itself when he dumped her for a college girl 2 months later. Isabella cried for a week straight, and I held my tongue. Didn't say "I told you so," even though every fiber of my being wanted to. I just held her while she sobbed and told her everything would be okay. For a brief moment, she needed me again. And God help me, I was grateful for it. College came, and with it, more distance. Isabella went to a prestigious school 3 states away, my money of course, and her calls home became less frequent. Once a week became once a month became only when she needed something. Leonard got sick during her junior year. Cancer, the doctors said. Stage 4. Nothing they could do except make him comfortable. I called Isabella immediately. "You need to come home. Your father." "I have finals, Mother. I can't just drop everything." "Your father is dying." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'll come for Thanksgiving." Thanksgiving was 2 months away. Leonard had weeks, maybe days. "Isabella, please." I said I'd come for Thanksgiving. Stop being so dramatic. She hung up. Just like that. Leonard died on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Isabella made it home for the funeral, dressed in black she clearly bought at the last minute because the price tag was still hanging from the inside of the collar. She cried at the service. Big, theatrical tears that made people pat her hand and whisper condolences. But the moment we got back to the house, she was on her phone, texting someone, her grief apparently having an off switch. "Your father loved you so much," I said quietly that evening. We were sitting in the living room, the weight of his absence crushing. "I know." She didn't look up from her screen. "He wanted you here. At the end." Now she looked up, irritation flashing across her face. "Are you trying to make me feel guilty? Because it won't work." I had responsibilities. Important things I couldn't just abandon. More important than your dying father? Oh my God. She stood up, phone clutched in her hand. You're unbelievable. You're actually trying to make his death about you, aren't you? About how I disappointed you. That's not what I... You know what, Maggie? She used my first name like a slap. Maybe if you'd been less suffocating, less needy, I would have wanted to come home more often. Did you ever think of that? She left the next morning without saying goodbye. I sat alone in the house Leonard and I had built together, surrounded by memories of a daughter who used to love me, and I wondered where it all went wrong. Wondered if loving someone too much could actually push them away. But even then, even with her cruelty still stinging, I forgave her. Because that's what mothers do. We forgive the unforgivable. We love past the point of reason. 6 months later, Isabella called. Not to check on me. Not to see how I was coping with Leonard's death. No, she called to tell me she'd met someone. His name is Jason, she gushed, her voice bright with excitement I hadn't heard in years. He's amazing, Mother. Successful, ambitious, so incredibly smart. You're going to love him. Something in my gut twisted. A warning I should have listened to. When someone you've sacrificed everything for introduces you to the person who will help them destroy you, do you see it coming, or are you too blinded by hope? I can't wait to meet him, I lied. And just like that, the final chapter of my destruction began. The first time Jason walked through my door, he was carrying an expensive bottle of wine and wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Voss, he said, extending his hand with practiced charm. I've heard so much about you. Isabella talks about you constantly. That was lie number 1. Isabella barely mentioned me at all anymore. But I shook his hand anyway, felt the firmness of his grip, the kind that's meant to impress, and tried to ignore the warning bells going off in my head. Isabella stood beside him glowing like she'd swallowed the sun. At 25, she was stunning, had my dark hair and Leonard's strong features. But there was something new in her expression. Something hungry. Isn't he wonderful? She asked, linking her arm through his. Wonderful, I echoed, the word tasting like chalk in my mouth. Dinner was excruciating. Jason dominated the conversation with stories about his business ventures, his connections, his vision for the future. He name-dropped CEOs and investors like they were personal friends. Meanwhile, Isabella hung on his every word like he was reciting scripture. So what is it you do exactly? I asked during a lull in his monologue. His eyes flickered, just for a second, before the smile returned. I'm in tech. Home automation systems. Smart houses, smart living. The wave of the future. Sounds expensive. Innovation always is. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. But that's where vision separates success from mediocrity. You have to be willing to invest in tomorrow. There was something calculated in how he said it. Like he was testing me. Seeing how I'd respond. Have you ever met someone and immediately known they were going to ruin your life, but you couldn't prove it so you just had to watch it happen? Jason's company is going to revolutionize how people live, Isabella jumped in. He's already secured some major investors. This is real, Mother. This is happening. I noticed she'd switched back to calling me Mother instead of Maggie. Interesting. Like she was putting on a show for him, playing the role of dutiful daughter. That's impressive, I said carefully. How long have you been in business? Another flicker in his eyes. About 2 years. Still in the growth phase, obviously. These things take time to scale. 2 years and still in the growth phase. That meant he hadn't turned a profit. Maybe hadn't even come close. Well, I said, standing to clear the plates. I wish you both the best of luck. Jason's hand shot out, catching my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop me. Actually, Mrs. Voss, we wanted to talk to you about something. There it was. The real reason for this visit. I sat back down slowly. I'm listening. Isabella's smile widened. Jason and I are getting married. My heart sank. I'd known it was coming, had felt it in the air all evening, but hearing it out loud made it real. Made it terrible. Congratulations, I managed. We know it's fast, Jason said, his thumb now rubbing circles on Isabella's hand. But when you know, you know. Right, babe. Right. Isabella's eyes were locked on him like he was the only person in the room. There's something else, Jason continued, and now his attention was fully on me. Predatory. Sharp. The wedding. We want something special. Something that reflects our future together. We were hoping. You want money. The words came out flat. Isabella's smile faltered. It's not like that. Isn't it? Mother, don't be difficult. This is my wedding. Your only daughter's wedding. Don't you want it to be perfect? Perfect. How much did perfect cost these days? 30,000? 50? More? How much? I asked. Jason had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. 75,000. But it's an investment in $75,000. I let the number hang in the air. For a wedding. For our future, Isabella corrected, her voice taking on that edge I knew too well. For the most important day of my life. But if you don't care about that, if you'd rather I get married in some courthouse. I didn't say no. The words escaped before I could stop them. Before I could think. Because even then, even knowing something was wrong, I couldn't bear the thought of Isabella's disappointment. Couldn't stand the idea of her looking at me with those cold eyes and deciding I wasn't worth her time. Jason's smile returned, wider now. Victorious. You're incredibly generous, Mrs. Voss. Isabella told me you would be. The wedding happened 3 months later. It was beautiful, I made sure of that. Flowers imported from Ecuador, a string quartet, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's car payments. Isabella looked like a princess walking down the aisle, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe I'd been wrong about Jason. Maybe he really did love her. Maybe this would work out. The illusion lasted about 6 months. Mother, we need to talk, Isabella said over lunch one afternoon. She'd started calling more regularly after the wedding, which should have been a red flag but instead just made me pathetically grateful. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Jason's company is taking off, actually. We're this close to a major breakthrough. She held her fingers an inch apart. But we need capital. Real capital. To scale up operations, hire the right people, get the infrastructure in place. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. How much capital? 200,000. I choked. Actually choked. Isabella. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's an investment. A real investment. You'd be a partner in the company. You'd see returns. Significant returns. I'm 70 years old. I don't need returns. I need my savings. Her face hardened. So that's a no? I didn't say that. But you're thinking it. She leaned back, crossing her arms. You know what? Fine. Don't invest. Don't believe in us. We'll figure it out on our own like we always do. Like you always do? The words came out sharper than I intended. Isabella, I paid for your college. Your wedding. I've given you. Given me. She laughed, cold and bitter. You mean the money Dad earned? The money you're sitting on while we're out here actually trying to build something. That's not fair. What's not fair is you acting like you're this saint who sacrificed everything when really, you just controlled everything. You kept me dependent on you, made sure I always had to come back, always had to ask permission. The accusations stung because somewhere deep down, in a place I didn't like to examine, there might have been a grain of truth to them. I'm sorry you see it that way, I said quietly. She stood up, grabbed her purse. The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, we're moving forward with other investors. People who actually believe in us. She left without paying for lunch. I sat there alone, staring at my cold coffee, and felt the trap closing around me. I wrote the check 2 days later. The pattern repeated itself over the next 3 years. Every 6 months or so, Isabella would call with another crisis. Another opportunity. Another reason why I needed to open my wallet. The investors pulled out. We need bridge funding. We're acquiring a competitor. This will triple our market share. There's a supply chain issue. Temporary. Just need to cover costs for a few months. Each time, I told myself it would be the last. Each time, I was wrong. Jason started coming to the house more often, always with that same smile, that same confident pitch. He'd sit in Leonard's favorite chair, which bothered me more than I wanted to admit, and spread out financial projections that looked impressive if you didn't know what you were looking at. "You're building a legacy here, Maggie," he'd say, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being Mrs. Voss to him too. "Isabella's legacy. Isn't that what you always wanted?" And like a fool, I'd nod. Like a fool, I'd sign. My accountant tried to warn me. "Mrs. Voss, these investments, they're not showing returns. In fact, the company seems to be hemorrhaging money. Have you seen their actual books?" "They're in a growth phase," I parroted back Jason's words. "Ma'am, with respect, I've been doing this for 30 years. These numbers don't add up. I strongly recommend." "Thank you for your concern. I'll handle it." I fired him 2 months later when he wouldn't stop pushing. Hired someone younger, less experienced, someone who wouldn't ask difficult questions. Looking back, I can see exactly when I crossed the line from generous to stupid. But at the time, all I could see was my daughter's approval. The way she'd smile when I agreed to help. The way she'd hug me, briefly, carefully, like I might break, and say, "You're the best mother." I was starving for those crumbs of affection. And Jason knew it. One evening, about 4 years into the marriage, I stopped by their house unannounced. It was a massive place, modern, cold, all glass and steel. They'd bought it with my money, though they'd never acknowledged that directly. I rang the doorbell. No answer. But I could see lights on inside, could hear voices. I tried the handle, it was unlocked. "Hello?" I called out, stepping into the foyer. The voices got louder. Arguing. I followed the sound to Jason's study. "Can't keep doing this forever," Isabella was saying. "She's not stupid, Jason. Eventually, she's going to figure it out." "She's not going to figure out anything. She's too desperate for your love to see straight." My blood ran cold. What if she cuts us off? Isabella's voice held real fear now. "She won't. She's invested too much." Sunk cost fallacy. The more she puts in, the harder it is for her to walk away. It's basic psychology. I should have burst through the door right then. Should have confronted them. But my feet wouldn't move. I stood frozen, listening to my daughter and son-in-law discuss manipulating me like I was some kind of mark. "Besides," Jason continued, "we've got the parents as backup. They're already co-signed on 3 loans. If Maggie tries to bail, we just shift the burden to them. They're too proud to default." Isabella laughed. Actually laughed. "You're terrible." "I'm practical. There's a difference." I backed away slowly, carefully, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Got back to my car without them ever knowing I was there. That night, I sat in Leonard's study, surrounded by files and folders I'd been avoiding for years. Started really looking at the numbers. Really examining what I'd been signing. The company was worthless. Worse than worthless, it was a black hole, sucking in money and producing nothing. The investors Jason name-dropped were either fictional or long gone. The breakthrough they were always so close to achieving didn't exist. I'd been funding their lifestyle. Their house, their cars, their vacations to places I'd never been invited to visit. Every dollar I gave them went straight into maintaining an illusion of success while the company itself collapsed under the weight of its own fraud. My hands shook as I pulled out a bottle of wine. Leonard's favorite. I'd been saving it for a special occasion, though I didn't know what occasion could possibly be special enough anymore. "They think I'm weak," I said to his portrait hanging on the wall. He was smiling in it, the way he used to smile at me over morning coffee. "They think I'm just some pathetic old woman they can drain dry." The portrait didn't answer. But I heard Leonard's voice in my head anyway, clear as day, "So show them they're wrong." When you finally see the truth you've been running from, do you confront it or do you plan your revenge with the patience of someone who's learned that the best justice is served cold? I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and started making a list. Every investment. Every loan. Every forged signature I'd been too trusting to catch. They wanted to play games with an old woman? Fine. But they forgot one crucial detail. I'd lived 72 years. I'd survived miscarriages and heartbreak and the death of my soulmate. I'd raised a daughter who turned into a snake. And through it all, I'd learned something important. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means you're paying attention. And I'd been paying attention for a very long time. The thing about revenge is that it requires patience. The kind of patience I'd spent a lifetime cultivating. The kind most people mistake for passivity. I didn't confront them that night after I overheard their conversation. Didn't send angry texts or make tearful phone calls demanding explanations. Instead, I went home, poured myself another glass of Leonard's wine, and started planning. First step, information. Real information, not the doctored financial statements Jason had been feeding me for years. I hired a private investigator. Not the local guy everyone used for cheating spouse cases, someone from 3 states away, someone with no connections to my family, someone who wouldn't ask questions about why a 72-year-old woman needed a full background check on her daughter and son-in-law. His name was Marcus, ironic, considering that was also the name of Isabella's first real heartbreak, and he was worth every penny of his expensive retainer. "Give me 3 weeks," he said during our only face-to-face meeting. "I'll give you everything." He delivered in 2. The manila envelope he sent was thick enough to choke on. Inside, bank statements I'd never seen, loan applications with forged signatures, credit card bills that would make a fortune teller blush, and photographs. So many photographs. Jason at a casino in Atlantic City, chips stacked high in front of him. Isabella at a spa in Scottsdale, getting treatments that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Both of them at a restaurant I'd seen featured in magazines, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. All of this while they cried poverty to me. All of this while they claimed the company was so close to breaking even. Have you ever held proof of someone's betrayal in your hands and felt relief instead of anger because at least now you know you weren't crazy? But the real gold mine was buried in the financial documents. Marcus had somehow, I didn't ask how, gotten access to their actual accounts. Not the ones they showed me, but the real ones. The company existed, technically. But it had no products, no revenue, no legitimate business operations. It was a shell, a front, a pretty story they told to justify bleeding me dry. Every dollar I'd invested had gone straight into their personal accounts, filtered through just enough legal loopholes to make it defensible if anyone asked questions. Which, of course, no one had. Because the only person who should have been asking questions was too desperate for her daughter's love to see what was happening. I spread the documents across Leonard's desk, creating a timeline. Tracked every lie, every manipulation, every moment they'd smiled to my face while plotting behind my back. The wedding money? They'd pocketed half of it, used the rest to make a down payment on that glass monstrosity they called a house. The investment opportunities? Most of them never existed. The ones that did had been abandoned the moment my check cleared. The temporary bridge funding? There was nothing temporary about it. It was just theft with better packaging. But here's what they didn't know, I wasn't just some old lady with a checkbook. Before I'd met Leonard, before I'd become a wife and mother, I'd been an accountant. A damn good one. I'd given it up when Isabella was born, poured all that analytical skill into being the perfect mother instead. Biggest mistake of my life. But the skills were still there, buried under years of maternal instinct and misplaced devotion. And now I was dusting them off, sharpening them, preparing to use them in ways I never imagined I would. Second step, consultation. I needed a lawyer. Not a family lawyer. I tried that route when Leonard died and gotten some hand-holding grief counselor in a suit. I needed a shark. Someone who understood money and manipulation and how to use the law like a weapon. I found her through Marcus. Her name was Patricia Chun, and her office was in a high-rise downtown with views that probably cost more than most people's houses. She was 45, impeccably dressed, and had eyes that could cut glass. "Mrs. Voss," she said, gesturing to a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. "Marcus says you need help with a family matter. My daughter and son-in-law have been defrauding me for 4 years. I want to destroy them." Most lawyers would have flinched at the bluntness. Patricia just smiled. "Tell me everything." I did. Laid it all out, every investment, every loan, every lie. Showed her the documents Marcus had provided. Watched her flip through them with the calm efficiency of someone who'd seen it all before. "This is good," she finally said. "Very good. They've been sloppy. Greedy people always are. Can we prosecute? We can. But prosecution is messy. Public. Are you prepared for that? For the media attention, the family drama, the possibility that they try to paint you as a bitter old woman seeking revenge. I hadn't thought about that part. Hadn't considered that in exposing them, I'd be exposing myself too. Exposing my failure as a mother, my blindness, my desperate need for love that let me ignore every warning sign. What are my other options? Patricia leaned back in her chair. We make them destroy themselves. Legally, quietly, and in a way that leaves no room for them to claim victimhood. I'm listening. She outlined the plan with the precision of a surgeon. First, we'd cut off all funding. Immediately. Close the accounts they had access to, cancel the credit cards I'd foolishly added them to, terminate any automatic transfers. Second, we'd call in every loan. Every single dollar I'd invested would be reclassified as a personal loan, which legally, it was since there was no legitimate business to invest in. With proper documentation and Patricia's magic, those loans would become debt. Immediate, crushing debt. Third, and this was the beautiful part, we'd go after the assets they'd purchased with my money. The house, the cars, the investment properties they'd bought thinking I'd never notice. All of it had paper trails leading back to my accounts. All of it was technically mine. The foreclosure process takes about 6 months in this state, Patricia explained. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Their credit will be destroyed, their assets seized, and their company, such as it is, will be bankrupt. What about Jason's parents? He mentioned they'd co-signed on loans. Patricia's smile turned predatory. Even better. If they're co-signed, they're liable. When your daughter and son-in-law default, which they will, the banks will go after the parents too. Multi-generational destruction. Very thorough. I should have felt guilty about involving Jason's parents. They were innocent in this, probably had no idea what their son was doing. But I remembered that conversation I'd overheard, we've got the parents as backup. They're too proud to default. Jason had been willing to sacrifice his own parents to keep the scam running. I was just accelerating the inevitable. How much will this cost me? I asked Patricia. 30,000 retainer. Plus expenses. 30,000. Less than half what I'd spent on their wedding. Less than a fraction of what they'd stolen. Done. We shook hands. The die was cast. Third step, appearances. This was crucial. I couldn't let them know anything had changed. Couldn't give them any warning that the trap was being set. So when Isabella called 2 weeks later asking for another small loan, 50,000 this time, some story about equipment failure, I acted exactly as I always had. 50,000 is a lot of money, Isabella. I know, Mother, but this is critical. If we don't fix this now, we could lose everything. The irony was almost funny. They were about to lose everything, but not for the reasons she thought. Let me think about it, I said, keeping my voice tired and uncertain. The voice of an old woman who'd been worn down by years of manipulation. Don't think too long, she warned. This opportunity won't wait. I'll call you tomorrow. I didn't call. Let her stew for 3 days, let her worry that maybe she'd finally pushed too hard. Then I sent a text, I can do 40,000. Best I can manage right now. Her response came within seconds. Perfect. You're a lifesaver, Mother. But I didn't send the money. Not yet. Patricia had advised me to wait, to let them get desperate, to let the tension build until they were panicking. Desperate people make mistakes. A week passed. Isabella called 5 times. I let it go to voicemail each time, played the part of the forgetful old lady who probably couldn't figure out how to wire money. When I finally answered, she was barely containing her frustration. Mother, where's the money? We needed it days ago. I'm sorry, dear. The bank has been giving me trouble. Something about fraud protection on large transfers. You know how they are with older people. A lie, of course. But a believable one. Can you go in person? Please? This is urgent. I'll try tomorrow. Tomorrow came and went. So did the next day. And the next. Each delay wounded them tighter, made them more frantic. Jason started calling too. His voice had lost that smooth charm, replaced by something harder. More desperate. Maggie, we really need that money. Like, really need it. The company is in a critical phase and… I'm doing my best, Jason. These things take time. We don't have time. There it was. The mask slipping. The panic showing through. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't make the bank move faster. Maybe you should talk to your other investors. Silence on the other end. Long, telling silence. What other investors? I prodded innocently. Right. Yes. Of course. I'll check with them. He hung up abruptly, probably realizing he'd almost admitted there were no other investors. That it had always been just me, just my money, just my endless capacity to be used. Meanwhile, Patricia was working behind the scenes. Filing paperwork, sending notices, setting dominoes in place. The foreclosure on their house was initiated. The loan recalls were processed. The asset freeze was implemented. And through it all, I maintained my performance. The concerned mother. The confused old lady. The cash cow who'd been reliable for so long that they couldn't imagine I'd ever stop. Fourth step, the final touch. The golden envelope. I spent a week preparing it. Every document perfectly organized, every piece of evidence clearly labeled. Bank statements highlighted in yellow. Forged signatures circled in red. A timeline of their fraud laid out in excruciating detail. But the real knife was the letter I included. Handwritten, on Leonard's favorite stationery that I'd been saving for something special. Isabella, it began. By the time you read this. I'm listening. She outlined the plan with the precision of a surgeon. First, we'd cut off all funding. Immediately. Close the accounts they had access to, cancel the credit cards I'd foolishly added them to, terminate any automatic transfers. Second, we'd call in every loan. Every single dollar I'd invested would be reclassified as a personal loan, which legally, it was since there was no legitimate business to invest in. With proper documentation and Patricia's magic, those loans would become debt. Immediate, crushing debt. Third, and this was the beautiful part, we'd go after the assets they'd purchased with my money. The house, the cars, the investment properties they'd bought thinking I'd never notice. All of it had paper trails leading back to my accounts. All of it was technically mine. The foreclosure process takes about 6 months in this state, Patricia explained. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Their credit will be destroyed, their assets seized, and their company, such as it is, will be bankrupt. What about Jason's parents? He mentioned they'd co-signed on loans. Patricia's smile turned predatory. Even better. If they're co-signed, they're liable. When your daughter and son-in-law default, which they will, the banks will go after the parents too. Multi-generational destruction. Very thorough. I should have felt guilty about involving Jason's parents. They were innocent in this, probably had no idea what their son was doing. But I remembered that conversation I'd overheard, we've got the parents as backup. They're too proud to default. Jason had been willing to sacrifice his own parents to keep the scam running. I was just accelerating the inevitable. How much will this cost me? I asked Patricia. 30,000 retainer. Plus expenses. 30,000. Less than half what I'd spent on their wedding. Less than a fraction of what they'd stolen. Done. We shook hands. The die was cast. Third step, appearances. This was crucial. I couldn't let them know anything had changed. Couldn't give them any warning that the trap was being set. So when Isabella called 2 weeks later asking for another small loan, 50,000 this time, some story about equipment failure, I acted exactly as I always had. 50,000 is a lot of money, Isabella. I know, Mother, but this is critical. If we don't fix this now, we could lose everything. The irony was almost funny. They were about to lose everything, but not for the reasons she thought. Let me think about it, I said, keeping my voice tired and uncertain. The voice of an old woman who'd been worn down by years of manipulation. Don't think too long, she warned. This opportunity won't wait. I'll call you tomorrow. I didn't call. Let her stew for 3 days, let her worry that maybe she'd finally pushed too hard. Then I sent a text, I can do 40,000. Best I can manage right now. Her response came within seconds, perfect. You're a lifesaver, mother. But I didn't send the money. Not yet. Patricia had advised me to wait, to let them get desperate, to let the tension build until they were panicking. Desperate people make mistakes. A week passed. Isabella called 5 times. I let it go to voicemail each time, played the part of the forgetful old lady who probably couldn't figure out how to wire money. When I finally answered, she was barely containing her frustration. Mother, where's the money? We needed it days ago. I'm sorry, dear. The bank has been giving me trouble. Something about fraud protection on large transfers. You know how they are with older people. A lie, of course. But a believable one. Can you go in person? Please? This is urgent. I'll try tomorrow. Tomorrow came and went. So did the next day. And the next. Each delay wounded them tighter, made them more frantic. Jason started calling too. His voice had lost that smooth charm, replaced by something harder. More desperate. Maggie, we really need that money. Like, really need it. The company is in a critical phase and… I'm doing my best, Jason. These things take time. We don't have time. There it was. The mask slipping. The panic showing through. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't make the bank move faster. Maybe you should talk to your other investors. Silence on the other end. Long, telling silence. What other investors? I prodded innocently. Right. Yes. Of course. I'll check with them. He hung up abruptly, probably realizing he'd almost admitted there were no other investors. That it had always been just me, just my money, just my endless capacity to be used. Meanwhile, Patricia was working behind the scenes. Filing paperwork, sending notices, setting dominoes in place. The foreclosure on their house was initiated. The loan recalls were processed. The asset freeze was implemented. And through it all, I maintained my performance. The concerned mother. The confused old lady. The cash cow who'd been reliable for so long that they couldn't imagine I'd ever stop. 4th step, the final touch. The golden envelope. I spent a week preparing it. Every document perfectly organized, every piece of evidence clearly labeled. Bank statements highlighted in yellow. Forged signatures circled in red. A timeline of their fraud laid out in excruciating detail. But the real knife was the letter I included. Handwritten, on Leonard's favorite stationery that I'd been saving for something special. Isabella, it began. By the time you read this, you'll understand that your mother wasn't as foolish as you believed. I finished writing the letter at 3 a.m, my hand cramping from the careful script. Leonard always said I had beautiful handwriting. Said it looked like poetry even when I was just writing grocery lists. This wasn't a grocery list. This was a eulogy for the relationship I'd spent Isabella's entire life trying to build. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into the golden envelope along with all the evidence Patricia and I had compiled. The envelope itself had been Leonard's, real gold leaf on cream paper, the kind of thing you save for important occasions. This qualified. The funeral, because that's what this was, really, the funeral of my role as Isabella's mother, would happen on Mother's Day. The irony wasn't lost on me. The one day a year when children were supposed to honor their mothers, I'd be showing my daughter exactly what happened when you mistake patience for weakness. But first, I had to finish the trap. Had to make sure every piece was in place before the jaws snapped shut. Patricia called on a Tuesday. The foreclosure notice has been delivered. They have 30 days to respond, but given their financial situation, there's no way they can stop it. What about the company accounts? Frozen as of this morning. They'll try to access funds and find nothing. Should be discovering it right about. She paused, and I heard her checking something on her computer. Now, actually. As if on cue, my phone rang. Isabella. I let it ring 4 times before answering, my voice carefully neutral. Hello. What did you do? Isabella's voice was shaking. Not with sadness. With rage. The accounts are frozen. All of them. The company accounts, our personal accounts, everything. I don't understand, dear. What accounts? Don't play dumb, Mother. This has your fingerprints all over it. Mother. Not Maggie. Interesting how quickly respect returned when she needed something. Isabella, I really don't know what you're talking about. Have you called your bank? Of course I've called the bank. They said there's a legal hold on the accounts. Something about loan defaults and fraud investigations. Did you report us for fraud? The panic in her voice was delicious. I savored it like expensive wine. Why would I report you for fraud? You're my daughter. Then fix this. Call them, tell them it's a mistake, do something. I'm 72 years old, Isabella. I don't have that kind of influence over banks. Maybe you should talk to Jason? Surely he has connections, with all his investors and business partners. Another long silence. She was realizing slowly, painfully, that the house of cards was collapsing. We're coming over, she finally said. Tonight. We need to talk about this face to face. I'm afraid tonight doesn't work for me. I have plans. Cancel them. The entitlement in her voice, the assumption that I'd drop everything for her convenience, it was almost impressive in its audacity. No. Excuse me. I said no, Isabella. I have plans. We can meet this weekend if you'd like. This weekend? Are you insane? Our lives are falling apart and you want to schedule this like it's a coffee date. Mother's Day, I said calmly. Come for Mother's Day. We'll talk then. Mother's Day is 3 weeks away. Then I guess you have 3 weeks to figure things out on your own. Like adults do. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something else. Something that felt dangerously close to joy. Have you ever realized that the person you've been protecting doesn't deserve your protection, and the freedom that comes with that realization is almost intoxicating? The next 3 weeks were chaos for them. I know because I watched from a distance, gathering reports from Patricia and Marcus like they were episodes of a particularly satisfying television show. Jason tried to get emergency loans. Denied everywhere, their credit was destroyed, their company was worthless, and word had spread in business circles that they were radioactive. Isabella called her friends, the ones she'd been bragging to about her successful husband and thriving business. Most didn't return her calls. The ones who did offered empty sympathy and convenient excuses about why they couldn't help financially. They tried to sell the house privately, hoping to get ahead of the foreclosure. But the title was so tangled up in loans and legal holds that no buyer would touch it. Jason's parents got involved, which I'd been expecting. They called me directly, his mother's voice tight with barely controlled anger. Mrs. Voss, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're destroying our family. Your son destroyed your family when he forged my signature on loan documents that used your house as collateral. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light. He would never. Mrs. Chun will be happy to send you copies of the documents. I believe you'll recognize your home address on several of them. She hung up. Called back an hour later, her anger replaced by tears. Please. We'll lose everything. We're in our 70s. We can't start over. Neither could I said softly. But your son didn't care about that when he was using my money to fund his lifestyle while planning to shift the burden to you as backup. Ask him about that conversation. Ask him if he ever cared about what this would do to you. The crying got louder. I disconnected gently. Felt a twinge of guilt, but only a twinge. They'd raised the man who'd helped my daughter bleed me dry. At some point, parents had to answer for the monsters they created. Mother's Day arrived with perfect weather. Sunny warm, the kind of day that belonged in greeting cards. I spent the morning in my garden, tending to the roses Leonard had planted years ago. They were blooming beautifully this year, deep red petals that looked almost black in certain light. The golden envelope sat on my dining room table, right where it needed to be. I'd rehearsed this moment dozens of times in my head, but now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. Like I was watching myself from outside my body. The doorbell rang at exactly 11. Punctual for once. Probably because they were desperate. I opened the door to find Isabella looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her designer clothes hung wrong, like she'd lost weight. Jason stood behind her, his usual confidence replaced by barely contained fury. Mother, Isabella said, and her voice cracked on the word. Come in. They followed me to the dining room in silence. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Isabella's eyes immediately found the golden envelope, and I saw her face go pale. What's that? She asked. Sit down. For once, they obeyed without argument. Jason pulled out a chair for Isabella, a gesture that might have looked gentlemanly if his hands weren't shaking with rage. I remained standing. Needed the height advantage, the psychological edge. I imagine the last few weeks have been difficult for you both, I began. Difficult. Jason's voice was sharp. You've destroyed us. Frozen our accounts, stolen our company, turned the banks against us. And for what? Some petty revenge because Isabella hurt your feelings. Hurt my feelings. I let the words hang there. Is that what you think this is about? Isabella leaned forward, tears already forming. She'd always been good at crying on command. Mother, please. Whatever we did, whatever you think we did, we can fix it. We can make it right. But you have to unfreeze the accounts. We can't even buy groceries right now. You have $1 million house full of designer furniture, I pointed out. Sell something. We can't sell anything. You've put legal holds on everything we own. Not everything you own. Everything I bought. The distinction was important. Jason caught it first, his jaw clenching. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, still standing. Isabella is going to hand Jason that envelope. Jason is going to open it. And then we're all going to have a very honest conversation about the last 4 years. What's in it? Isabella whispered. The truth. Something you both seem allergic to. I slid the envelope across the table with one finger. It moved slowly, deliberately, like a chess piece delivering checkmate. Jason snatched it up, tore it open with shaking hands. I watched his face as he pulled out the documents. Watched the color drain. Watched his eyes widen as he realized exactly how much I knew. This is... He couldn't finish the sentence. Isabella grabbed some of the papers, scanning frantically. These are private. How did you get? Private. I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my ears. Nothing funded by my money is private. Every dollar you stole, every signature you forged, every lie you told while looking me in the eye, it's all there. Documented. Proven. Undeniable. We didn't steal, Jason started. You absolutely did. You called them investments, but there was no legitimate business to invest in. You called them loans, but you never intended to repay them. You called it a family helping family, but you were just con artists with better DNA. Isabella was crying now, real tears this time. Please, Mother. We made mistakes. We were desperate. The business was struggling and we just needed. You needed nothing, I cut her off. You wanted. There's a difference. You wanted the big house and the fancy cars and the lifestyle you couldn't afford. So you took it from me. Took it while calling me a failure. Took it while mocking me behind my back. Took it while planning to bleed me dry and then do the same to Jason's parents. Jason's head snapped up. How do you know about? I know everything. I heard you discussing it in your study. Heard you call me desperate and stupid. Heard you laugh about how easy it was to manipulate me. The color that had drained from his face came rushing back, turning him red with shame or anger. I couldn't tell which and didn't care. When the people who've been using you realize you heard everything, saw everything, and planned for everything, does their panic taste as sweet as you imagined? That was taken out of context, Jason tried weakly. Was it? Then provide the context that makes she's too desperate for your love to see straight sound acceptable. Silence. Beautiful, damning silence. Isabella reached for my hand across the table. I pulled it back like she'd burned me. Don't, I said quietly. Don't touch me. Don't cry at me. Don't perform. It's over. What's over? Her voice was barely a whisper. Everything. Your allowance, gone. Your company, bankrupt. Your house, being foreclosed. Your accounts, frozen permanently. Your ability to manipulate me, dead. Jason exploded out of his chair. You can't do this. We'll sue. We'll take you to court. You'll what? Present evidence of your fraud to a judge? Please do. I'll wait. He deflated like a punctured balloon, realizing the trap was perfect. Every move they could make would only make things worse. Why? Isabella asked, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely confused rather than manipulative. Why now? Why like this? I pulled out a chair and sat down finally, suddenly feeling every one of my 72 years. Because you called me a failure on Mother's Day while handing me gas station flowers and expecting me to smile and take it like I always do. Because you've been taking pieces of me for years and I finally realized, there's nothing left to take. You already have everything I was willing to give. We're family, Isabella started. Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't bleed each other dry while smiling. Family doesn't forge signatures and plan backup victims and laugh about manipulation. The papers sat between us like a murder weapon at a crime scene. All that evidence of their greed, their fraud, their utter contempt for the woman who'd given them everything. What do you want? Jason asked finally, his voice defeated. There has to be something. Money? An apology? What will it take to fix this? I stood up, grabbed my purse from the counter. There is no fixing this. It's done. You're done. Wait. Isabella scrambled to her feet. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. We need to figure out how to fix it. I asked, pausing at the threshold. How to convince me to save you one more time. How to squeeze just a little more blood from this stone. Jason grabbed the papers again, his eyes wild now. This says the house is being repossessed. My parents' house. You involved my family in this. Your family involved themselves when they helped you forge my signature on loan documents. The truth has a funny way of spreading, doesn't it? Isabella collapsed back into her chair, her perfect composure completely shattered. I don't understand. Why now? Why today? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, maybe for the last time as her mother. You want to know why today? Because you finally showed me exactly how much respect you have for me. And I decided to return the favor. The golden envelope glinted in the sunlight streaming through the windows. All that evidence, all that truth, laid bare between us. How long? Jason asked again, his voice barely a whisper. How long have you been planning this? I smiled then. The kind of smile that holds years of patience and pain and plans finally coming to fruition. Long enough to make sure there's no way out. And with that, I walked out of the house, leaving them with their panic and their papers and the wreckage of the empire they'd built on my back. The afternoon sun felt different as I drove away from their chaos. Lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying a weight for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. My phone started ringing before I'd even left their neighborhood. Isabella. I declined the call. It rang again immediately. Declined again. By the third attempt, I turned the phone off entirely. The silence was beautiful. I drove to the cemetery where Leonard was buried. Hadn't been there in months, too painful, too full of memories of what we'd built together and what our daughter had become. But today felt right. Today felt like I needed to tell him what I'd done. His headstone was simple, exactly what he'd wanted. Leonard Voss. Beloved husband. 1948 to 2019. No flowery language, no poetry. Just facts. That was Leonard, straightforward, honest, real. I sat down on the grass beside his grave, my old knees protesting the movement. Probably looked ridiculous, a 72-year-old woman sitting in a cemetery in her good dress, but there was nobody around to see. I did it, I said out loud, my voice steady. I finally stopped letting her use me. The wind rustled through the trees. If I believed in signs, I might have thought it was Leonard answering. But I was too old for fairy tales. The dead stayed dead, and the living had to deal with their own messes. You were right, you know. Back when she was 7 and threw that tantrum in the toy store. You said I was teaching her that fits got results. I should have listened. A squirrel darted across the grass, completely unconcerned with my confession. Nature didn't care about family drama, about betrayal, about mothers who'd finally had enough. I wonder if you'd be proud of me or disappointed. Proud that I finally stood up for myself? Or disappointed that it came to this? That I raised a daughter who'd steal from her own mother? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Because that was the thing about grief, you never got closure. Never got the final conversation, the last piece of advice, the reassurance that you'd made the right choice. When you're sitting at your husband's grave explaining why you just destroyed your daughter's life, do you feel victorious or just incredibly, overwhelmingly sad? Both, I realized. I felt both. My phone buzzed in my purse. I turned it back on without thinking. Not Isabella this time. Patricia. How did it go? She asked without preamble. Exactly as planned. Good. I've prepared the next steps. The bankruptcy filing goes through on Wednesday. The asset seizure begins Friday. By the end of next week, they'll have nothing except the clothes they're wearing and whatever they can hide from the courts. Nothing. The word echoed in my head. My daughter would have nothing. Mrs. Voss? Are you still there? I'm here. Do what needs to be done. There's one more thing. Jason's parents want to meet with you. They're proposing a settlement. They'll sign over their house voluntarily if you agree to drop the fraud charges. I closed my eyes, saw Jason's mother's face in my mind. That phone call where she'd cried, begged, pleaded. Two people in their 70s who'd worked their whole lives to build something, about to lose it all because their son was a con artist. Tell them. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Tell them I'll think about it. You're considering it? They're victims too, Patricia. They didn't know what their son was doing. With respect, Mrs. Voss, ignorance isn't innocence. They co-signed those loans. They enabled. I said I'll think about it. Silence on her end. Then, your call. I'll let them know. After she hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at Leonard's name carved into granite. Thought about mercy and justice and revenge and whether there was really any difference between them. The sun was starting to set when I finally stood up, my dress grass-stained, my heart still undecided. I touched Leonard's headstone one last time. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm just not sure what that is anymore. I drove home in the golden hour, that perfect light that makes everything look softer than it really is. The house was exactly as I'd left it that morning, quiet, empty mine. For the first time in 4 years, nobody had access to my accounts. Nobody could forge my signature. Nobody could smile while bleeding me dry. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it just felt lonely. I poured myself a glass of wine, not Leonard's fancy stuff, just the cheap bottle I kept for regular nights, and sat in his study. The room where I'd discovered the truth. The room where I'd planned their destruction. The room where I'd written that letter in the golden envelope. My laptop sat on the desk, still open to the spreadsheet I'd created. Every transaction, every theft, every lie documented in neat columns. 4 years of financial abuse, all reduced to rows and numbers. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, probably Isabella, coming to plead her case in person. But curiosity won out. It wasn't Isabella. It was Jason's parents. They stood on my doorstep looking like they'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. His mother was crying before she even spoke. His father kept his arm around her, his face carved from stone. Mrs. Voss, the father said. Please. Can we talk? Every instinct told me to say no. To close the door, protect myself, maintain the boundaries I'd finally learned to set. But something in his face, the resignation, the defeat, made me step aside. 5 minutes. They followed me inside, moving slowly, like the weight of their situation was physical. I didn't offer them seats. This wasn't a social call. We didn't know, the mother said immediately. About the fraud, the forgeries, any of it. Jason told us you were investing in the company willingly. That you believed in his vision. And the co-signing? The loans in your name. The father's jaw tightened. He said it was standard business practice. That investors required personal guarantees. We wanted to support our son. Even when you couldn't afford to? We're his parents, the mother whispered. What were we supposed to do? The question hit harder than I expected. What were parents supposed to do when their children needed them? When they asked for help? When they promised it would all work out? Exactly what I'd done, apparently. Enable them until there was nothing left. Your son stole from me, I said quietly. For years. With Isabella's help. They manipulated me, lied to me, forged my signature. They weren't planning to pay any of it back. And when I finally caught on, they planned to shift the burden to you. You weren't family to them, you were backup collateral. The mother's crying got louder. The father just stared at me, his expression unreadable. We know, he finally said. Jason confessed everything this afternoon. After you left. He broke down, told us the whole thing. What they'd done, how long it had been going on, how he'd planned to use our house to keep the scheme running. And yet you're here asking me for mercy. We're not asking for mercy for him, the father said. We're asking for mercy for us. We're 74 years old. If we lose our house, we have nowhere to go. No savings left, we spent it all trying to help Jason. No family except a son who destroyed us. We'll die homeless, Mrs. Voss. Is that what you want? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Was it what I wanted? For two elderly people to lose everything because their son was a criminal and I wanted justice? I don't know what I want anymore, I admitted. I wanted my daughter to love me. I wanted my investments to mean something. I wanted to believe I was building her future instead of funding her fraud. I wanted a lot of things I didn't get. So now we all suffer, the mother asked, her voice rising. You were foolish to trust them, so we pay the price? I was foolish. The anger came rushing back, hot and righteous. I was foolish to believe my own daughter? To think a mother's love meant something? To trust that family wouldn't destroy family? Yes, she shouted back. Yes, you were foolish. Because that's what love makes us, stupid, blind, willing to sacrifice everything for people who don't deserve it. You think you're the only parent who's been manipulated by their child? The only one who's given too much and gotten nothing back. The words echoed through the house. Two mothers, two fools, two casualties of children who'd learned to weaponize love. I'm sorry, she said more quietly. I'm sorry for shouting. I'm sorry your daughter did this to you. I'm sorry my son helped her. But please, Mrs. Voss, don't punish us for their sins. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw myself reflected back. People who'd tried their best and failed anyway. People who'd loved too much and paid for it. People who were about to lose everything because they'd trusted the wrong person. I need time, I said finally. To think. To decide. To figure out where justice ends and cruelty begins. How much time? The father asked. I don't know. I'll call Patricia this week. She'll let you know. They left without argument, moving slowly back to their car like prisoners walking to execution. I watched from the window as they drove away, the father's hand reaching for his wife's, holding on like she might disappear if he let go. Just like Leonard used to hold my hand. I went back to the study, back to that spreadsheet with its damning numbers. Started a new column, collateral damage. Added Jason's parents. Added myself. Added the person I used to be before betrayal turned me hard. When you set out for revenge, how many innocent people are acceptable losses? And how do you sleep at night after you've decided? I didn't have answers. Just questions that kept multiplying in the dark. The call started at 6 in the morning 2 days later. Isabella, over and over, the phone buzzing like an angry wasp until I finally answered. Are you satisfied? She asked, no greeting, no pretense. We're being evicted. Today. They're putting our things on the lawn. Our neighbors are watching. It's humiliating. Humiliating, I repeated, tasting the word. You know what's humiliating? Your daughter calling you a failure on Mother's Day. That's humiliating. This is about hurt feelings? Her voice climbed an octave. You destroyed our lives over hurt feelings? No. I destroyed your lies. Your lives were built on fraud, I just exposed the foundation. We have nowhere to go. She was crying now, that particular sobbing that used to make me rush to comfort her. Used to. Jason's parents won't talk to us. My friends won't return my calls. We're going to be homeless, Mother. Homeless. The word was meant to stab me, make me bleed guilt. It almost worked. You have 2 college degrees and a trust fund I set up when you were born. You'll figure it out. The trust fund. She laughed, high and hysterical. You think I have access to that? Jason borrowed against it years ago. It's gone, Mother. Everything is gone. I sat down slowly, my legs suddenly weak. The trust fund. Leonard and I had put $50,000 in it the year she was born. Been adding to it every birthday, every Christmas. It should have been worth over $200,000 by now. He borrowed against your trust fund? We needed the money. The company was struggling and... Stop calling it a company. I shouted, surprising myself with the volume. It wasn't a company. It was a lie you both told while stealing from me. Silence. Then, what do you want me to say? Yes, we took your money. Yes, we lied. Yes, we said cruel things. But I'm still your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you? When someone uses blood relation as a shield after they've been stabbing you with it, do you owe them mercy just because you share DNA? It used to mean everything, I said quietly. That was the problem. So that's it? You're just going to let us be destroyed? Let Jason's parents lose their house? Let all of this fall apart and feel nothing? Who said I feel nothing? My voice cracked. You think this doesn't hurt me? You think I wanted to discover my daughter is a thief? That I wanted to spend my retirement planning revenge instead of planning vacations? That I wanted to become this person? Then stop. Call Patricia, call the banks, fix this. You have the power to. I had the power all along, Isabella. I just spent 4 years pretending I didn't because I was desperate for your love. Well, congratulations, you cured me of that. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. The house was too quiet, too full of ghosts. Leonard's favorite chair empty. Isabella's childhood photos still on the mantel. Memories of better times that now felt like lies. The eviction was happening right now, she'd said. I could drive over there. Could stop it with a phone call. Could be the hero, swoop in at the last minute, save the day like mothers are supposed to do. Instead, I poured myself coffee and sat in the garden. Watched the roses bloom. Let nature continue its cycle while human drama played out somewhere across town. Patricia called at noon. The eviction is complete. They're staying in a motel on Highway 9. The cheap one with the hourly rates. From $1 million house to a motel with hourly rates. The fall was poetic in its completeness. Jason's parents are signing the deed transfer today, Patricia continued. In exchange, you're dropping the fraud charges against them specifically. Jason and Isabella are still on the hook. Can they actually face jail time? Depends on if the DA wants to prosecute. The evidence is solid enough. But given their current state, they might accept a plea deal. Community service, restitution, probation. Restitution from what? They have nothing left to take. Exactly. Which means this is about as close to rock bottom as they can get without criminal records. The question is this enough for you? Was it? I'd set out to destroy them, and I had. Their business was bankrupt, their accounts frozen, their house gone, their reputation ruined. Everything they'd built on my stolen money had been dismantled brick by brick. I don't know, I admitted. Well, decide soon. Because Jason tried to access one of the frozen accounts this morning. When it didn't work, he attempted to write a bad check at a grocery store. The manager called the police. He's being charged with check fraud on top of everything else. My stomach twisted. He's that desperate? He's that stupid. Desperate people either get smart or get stupider. He chose poorly. After Patricia hung up, I sat with that information. Jason, who'd been so smooth, so confident, so sure he could charm his way through anything, reduced to writing bad checks for groceries. Isabella, who'd had everything handed to her, living in an hourly rate motel. This was justice. This was what I'd wanted. This was revenge served perfectly cold. So why did I feel so empty? The doorbell rang again. I was getting tired of unexpected visitors. But this time it was someone I hadn't seen in years. Carol, my old friend from before Isabella was born. Before I'd sacrificed every friendship at the altar of motherhood. I heard, she said simply. Through the gossip chain. Can I come in? I stepped aside, suddenly grateful for company that wasn't crying or begging or accusing. Carol looked older, we all did, but her eyes were still sharp, still kind. She sat in Leonard's chair without asking, poured herself tea from the pot I kept ready, and waited. Go ahead, I finally said. Tell me I'm cruel. Tell me I should forgive her. Tell me family is supposed to forgive. I was going to tell you it's about damn time. I blinked. What? Maggie, I've watched you enable that girl for 30 years. Watched you sacrifice yourself on the altar of her happiness. Watched her take and take while you gave and gave and gave. I'm frankly amazed it took you this long to snap. She's my daughter. So what? That gives her license to abuse you? To steal from you? To call you a failure and expect you to smile? Carol shook her head. The best thing you ever did for Isabella was cut her off. Maybe now she'll learn what real struggle looks like. What consequences feel like. What it means to support yourself instead of draining your mother dry. She's living in a motel. Jason's being charged with check fraud. This isn't teaching her a lesson, it's destroying her. Good. Carol's voice was fierce. Let her be destroyed. Let her hit bottom. Let her figure out who she is when she can't coast on your money and your guilt. Because right now, she's nothing but a parasite in expensive shoes. The words should have offended me. Should have triggered that maternal instinct to defend my child. But instead, they felt like permission. Permission to stop feeling guilty. Permission to stop wondering if I'd gone too far. You think I did the right thing? I think you did the only thing. The question is, what are you going to do now? What was I going to do now? I'd spent months planning revenge and weeks executing it. But I hadn't thought beyond the destruction. Hadn't planned for the aftermath. I don't know. Well, figure it out. Because from what I hear, Isabella and Jason are still calling, still begging, still expecting you to save them. And if you cave now, after all this, you'll have proved them right, that your boundaries are negotiable and your words mean nothing. Carol stayed for 2 hours, drinking tea and filling me in on 30 years of life I'd missed while obsessing over Isabella. Her kids, her grandkids, her career she'd built while I was busy sacrificing mine. She'd lived a full life while I'd lived through my daughter. After she left, I felt different. Clearer. Like talking to someone who wasn't emotionally invested had given me perspective I'd been missing. My phone rang. Isabella again. This time I answered. What? My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion she was probably expecting. I need $500. For the motel. For food. For... No. Mother, please. I said no. The word is complete. It needs no explanation. You're going to let us starve? You're 30 years old with 2 functioning hands. Get a job. A job. She said it like I'd suggested she eat glass. What job is going to hire me? Everyone knows what happened. Everyone knows we're thieves. I supplied frauds, con artists who targeted a vulnerable old woman. We targeted our mother. That's different. Is it? Because it feels exactly the same from where I'm standing. More crying. More begging. More attempts to make me feel guilty for the consequences of her own actions. I'm your daughter, she said finally, when nothing else worked. You're supposed to love me no matter what. And there it was. The core of her manipulation. The belief that motherhood meant unconditional tolerance of any behavior, any betrayal, any cruelty. I do love you, I said quietly. But I love myself more now. And that's something you should have learned to do a long time ago, before you needed to steal from others to feel valuable. I hung up. Blocked her number. Blocked Jason's number. Drew a line in the sand and stepped back from it. The house was quiet again. But this time, the quiet felt different. Felt earned. Felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. When you finally choose yourself over someone who's been choosing themselves at your expense for years, does it feel like betrayal or like survival? It felt like both. And that was okay. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence from Isabella. 3 weeks of headlines about Jason's trial. 3 weeks of me learning how to live with the empty space where my daughter used to be. The trial was brief. Jason took a plea deal. 18 months in minimum security prison, 5 years probation, full restitution to be paid when financially able. Which meant never, since he had nothing and would have less than nothing when he got out. Isabella wasn't charged. Patricia had been right, they couldn't prove she'd knowingly participated in the fraud. She was just the wife who'd benefited from stolen money. Not illegal, just morally bankrupt. I watched the sentencing from my living room, the local news showing Jason being led away in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow. Less confident. More like what he'd always been under the expensive suits, a small man with big dreams and no ethics to constrain them. Isabella stood outside the courthouse, reporters shoving microphones in her face. She looked better than when she'd shown up at my house, clean put together, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. Someone had helped her. I wondered who. "Do you blame your mother for this?" a reporter asked. Isabella's face flickered, anger, hurt, calculation, before settling into something practiced. "My mother did what she thought was right. I can't blame her for protecting herself, even if it meant destroying her family." The phrasing was perfect. Admitted nothing, implied everything, painted me as the villain without directly accusing me. She'd learned from the best con artist, after all. "What will you do now?" another reporter called out. "Rebuild. Learn. Become better." Standard platitudes, delivered with just enough emotion to seem genuine. My husband made mistakes, but he's not a monster. He's a good man who made bad choices. And I'll be waiting for him when he gets out. Loyal wife standing by her criminal husband. The public would eat it up. I turned off the TV before I could hear more. Carol called that evening. "Did you see the news?" "Unfortunately." "She's playing the victim beautifully. I almost believed her myself. She's had a good teacher. I spent 30 years teaching her that playing the victim gets results. You're not responsible for who she became, Maggie." "Aren't I? I created her. Fed her entitlement. Taught her that the world revolved around her. This is what I made." "You made a child. She made herself into this. There's a difference." Maybe there was. Maybe there wasn't. All I knew was that somewhere between birth and 30 years old, the miracle baby I'd wanted so desperately had turned into someone I didn't recognize. Patricia called a week later with unexpected news. Isabella filed paperwork to declare bankruptcy. Personal bankruptcy, separate from the company. She's claiming she has no assets and can't pay the restitution. Can she do that? She can try. But it won't erase the civil judgments against her. She'll still owe you the money. She just won't have any legal obligation to pay it while she's bankrupt. So she gets away with it. In a sense. But she'll spend the next 7 to 10 years with destroyed credit, unable to get loans, unable to buy property, unable to rebuild the lifestyle she had. It's not prison, but it's not freedom either. Small comfort. But comfort nonetheless. The seasons changed. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. I developed routines that didn't involve Isabella. Started attending Carol's book club. Volunteered at the library. Took up painting, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was busy being the perfect mother. My paintings were terrible. But they were mine. Christmas came. The first Christmas without Isabella in 30 years. I spent it with Carol's family, surrounded by laughter and warmth and people who valued me for something other than my checkbook. Her grandchildren climbed on my lap and showed me their presents and called me Grandma Maggie, without any prompting. It should have filled the void. Instead, it just reminded me of what I'd lost. What I'd never have. My own grandchildren, if Isabella ever had them, would grow up not knowing me. Would hear stories about the bitter grandmother who destroyed their parents. Would learn to hate me without ever meeting me. The thought hurt more than I wanted to admit. New Year's came and went. I made no resolutions. What was there to resolve? I'd already burned my life down and was learning to live in the ashes. Then, in late January, almost a year after that Mother's Day confrontation, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter, in an envelope, with a stamp. The return address was the motel. She was still there. Still living in that place with hourly rates and broken dreams. I almost threw it away without reading it. Almost. But curiosity won out. The handwriting was Isabella's, but messier than I remembered. Less practiced, more real. Dear Mother, it began. I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything anymore. But I needed to write it anyway, even if you burn it without finishing. Jason is in prison. I visit him every week, take the bus 3 hours each way because I can't afford a car. He cries every time I leave. Says he's sorry, says he'll make it up to me, says we'll rebuild when he gets out. I nod and smile and lie that I believe him. But I don't believe him. I don't believe in anything anymore. I got a job. Waitressing at a diner near the motel. The pay is terrible. The customers are worse. My feet hurt all the time and I smell like grease, and I come home to a room that costs $40 a night and I think about the life I had. The house, the clothes, the certainty that I'd never have to struggle. I took it all for granted. Took you for granted. Thought you'd always be there, always forgive me, always hand over whatever I needed because that's what you'd always done. I was wrong. I don't blame you for what you did. I'm angry about it, God, I'm so angry sometimes I can't breathe, but I don't blame you. You were protecting yourself. Something I never let you do before. There's no asking for forgiveness here. No begging for money or help or rescue. I know that bridge is burned. No, it's my fault. No, I have to live with that. I just wanted you to know, I'm learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. Learning what it's like to earn money instead of stealing it. Learning what consequences feel like. Learning who I am when I'm not hiding behind your money or Jason's charm or the fantasy we built. I don't like who I'm learning I am. But at least it's real. I hope you're happy. I mean that sincerely, not sarcastically. You deserve happiness after everything we put you through. You deserve peace. I'm sorry. For all of it. For every cruel word, every forged signature, every time I took your love and twisted it into something ugly. I'm sorry. Your daughter, Isabella. I read the letter 3 times. Looking for manipulation, for hidden requests, for the con underneath the contrition. But if it was there, it was buried deeper than I could find. When the person who destroyed you finally says they're sorry, are you required to forgive them, or are you allowed to just acknowledge their pain without taking responsibility for fixing it? I folded the letter carefully and put it in Leonard's desk drawer. Didn't respond. Didn't call. Didn't rush to save her from her hard-won lessons. But I didn't throw it away either. Maybe someday, years from now, when the wounds weren't so fresh and the anger wasn't so raw, there might be room for something like reconciliation. Not forgiveness. Forgiveness required trust, and trust required time I might not have. But maybe acknowledgement. Maybe coexistence. Maybe a careful, boundaried relationship between 2 women who'd hurt each other and learned to live with the scars. Or maybe not. Maybe some things, once broken, stayed broken. And that was okay too. The important thing was that I'd survived. Had learned to put myself first. Had discovered that life didn't end when you stopped sacrificing yourself for someone who didn't appreciate the sacrifice. Spring came. The roses bloomed again, more beautiful than ever. I painted them, badly, but with joy. Carol helped me plant a new garden, vegetables this time instead of just flowers. Something that would feed me instead of just looking pretty. I was learning to nurture myself the way I'd once nurtured Isabella. Learning that I deserved care, attention, resources. Learning that loving yourself wasn't selfish, it was survival. One afternoon in May, I was in the garden when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Voss. A woman's voice, unfamiliar. This is Linda Chun. I'm a therapist at the community center downtown. Your daughter listed you as an emergency contact. My heart stopped. Is she okay? She's fine. She's here actually, in my office. She's been coming to therapy for the past 3 months, working through some things. She asked if I'd call you, see if you'd be willing to meet with her. Not alone, in a mediated session, with me present. Why? Because she's trying to heal. Trying to understand what she did and why. And part of that process involves facing the people she hurt. But only if you're willing. No pressure, no obligation. I looked at my garden, at the life I'd built in the year since I'd destroyed hers. Looked at the peace I'd found in the absence of her chaos. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I'm asking. Here's my number. Call if you decide you want to talk. After she hung up, I sat in the dirt with my hands in the soil and tried to figure out what I wanted. Did I want to hear Isabella apologize in person? Did I want to risk opening that door again? Did I want anything to do with the daughter who'd betrayed me? I didn't know. But for the first time in a year, I didn't immediately say no. And maybe that was progress. Maybe that was healing. Maybe that was what justice looked like after the revenge was done, not hatred, not forgiveness, but the careful possibility of something in between. I didn't call Linda Chen for 2 weeks. The therapist's number sat in my phone like a test I wasn't ready to take. Some days I'd hover over it, my fingers shaking above the screen. Other days I'd forget about it entirely, lost in my new routines, my new life, my new identity as something other than Isabella's mother. Carol found me in my garden one afternoon, pulling weeds with more force than necessary. "You're thinking about it," she said. "Not a question. I don't know what I'm thinking." "Yes, you do. You're thinking about whether seeing her again will destroy the peace you've built. Whether hearing her apologize will open old wounds. Whether giving her any access to you means giving her power over you again." I sat back on my heels, dirt under my fingernails, sweat on my brow. "When did you become a mind reader?" "I've known you for 40 years, Maggie. I know how you think." She knelt beside me, her own gardening gloves already dirty from helping earlier. "The question isn't whether you should see her. It's whether you want to. And those are very different things." Did I want to? I'd spent a year learning to live without her. Learning that I could be whole without being her mother. Learning that my value didn't come from how much I sacrificed for someone who didn't appreciate it. But I'd also spent 30 years loving her. And love, even poisoned love, doesn't just disappear because you cut off contact. It lingers. It whispers. It asks uncomfortable questions in the middle of the night. What if she's the same? I asked quietly. What if this is just another manipulation? Another way to get close so she can ask for money? Then you'll see it coming this time. You're not the same woman you were a year ago, Maggie. You've learned to recognize the warning signs. You've built boundaries. And if she crosses them, you'll end the session and walk away. Just like that. Just like that. You're not trapped anymore. That's the difference. The thoughts settled into my bones. I wasn't trapped. I had choices. I could see Isabella in a controlled environment with a therapist present and protective boundaries in place. Or I could choose not to. Either way, it was my decision. My power. My life. That evening, I called Linda Chen. "Mrs. Voss, thank you for calling back. I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I. Tell me what this session would look like." She outlined it carefully. We'd meet in her office, neutral territory. Linda would be present the entire time, mediating, ensuring the conversation stayed productive. I could leave at any moment, no questions asked. The goal wasn't reconciliation, it was accountability. Isabella taking responsibility for her actions, me expressing the impact they'd had, both of us acknowledging what had been broken. No promises of fixing anything, Linda emphasized. No expectations of forgiveness or rebuilding the relationship. Just honesty in a safe space. And Isabella agreed to these terms? She did. She's been working hard, Mrs. Voss. I can't share details of our sessions, but I can tell you she's doing the work. Whether it's enough to change her fundamentally, time will tell. But she's trying. Trying. The word felt foreign applied to Isabella. She'd spent 30 years taking the easy path, the manipulative path, the path paved with my money and my enabling. Trying was new. "I'll do it," I heard myself say. "One session. And if it goes badly, that's it." Understood. How does next Thursday at 2 o'clock work? It works. After I hung up, I sat in Leonard's study and told his portrait what I'd agreed to. Waited for guilt or anxiety or dread. Instead, I just felt curious. Curious about who Isabella had become in the year since I'd last seen her. Curious about whether suffering had taught her anything. Curious about whether the stranger who shared my DNA might become someone I could recognize again. Thursday arrived too quickly and too slowly. I changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on simple pants and a blouse. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed money. Carol offered to come with me, wait in the lobby, be there in case I needed backup. I declined. This was something I needed to do alone. Linda Chen's office was in a modest building downtown, the kind of place where people went when they couldn't afford fancy private practices. The waiting room was clean but worn, magazines from 6 months ago, a water cooler that hummed too loudly. Isabella was already there. She sat in a corner chair, her hands twisted together, her eyes fixed on the floor. She'd cut her hair, shoulder length now instead of the long waves she'd always worn. No makeup. Simple clothes that looked like thrift store finds. She'd lost more weight since I'd last seen her on the news. She looked up when I walked in. Our eyes met. Hers filled with tears immediately. "Mother," she whispered. "Isabella." The formality hung between us like a shield. Linda emerged from her office then, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the calm demeanor of someone who'd heard every terrible thing humans could do to each other. "Mrs. Voss, Isabella, thank you both for coming. Shall we?" The office was small but comfortable. 2 chairs facing each other with Linda's chair positioned slightly off to the side. A tissue box on the table between us. I took my seat, back straight, hands folded. Isabella perched on hers like a bird ready to flee. "Let's start with ground rules," Linda began. "We're here to talk honestly, but respectfully. No name calling, no interrupting, no yelling. If emotions get too intense, we'll pause. Mrs. Voss, you can leave at any time. Isabella, the same. This is about communication, not confrontation. Everyone understand?" We both nodded. "Isabella, you asked for this meeting. Would you like to start?" Isabella took a shaky breath, her hands still twisted together. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. I know I said it in the letter, but I needed to say it to your face. I'm sorry for stealing from you. For lying to you. For taking advantage of your love. For every cruel thing I said. For," her voice broke. "For being the kind of daughter who made her mother choose between self-preservation and family." The apology hung in the air. I waited for the but. For the excuse, the justification, the pivot to asking for help. It didn't come. "I don't have reasons that make it okay," Isabella continued. "Jason and I were greedy. We wanted more than we'd earned. And you were there, and you loved me, and I used that love like a weapon against you. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway." I stayed silent, letting her words settle. Looking for the lie underneath. Looking for the angle. "Therapy has helped me understand why," she said quietly. "Why I felt entitled to your money. Why I thought you owed me everything. Why I confused love with control and care with currency. But understanding why doesn't excuse what I did. It just explains it." "And what is the explanation?" I asked, my voice steady. She looked at Linda, who nodded encouragement. "I was raised to believe I was special. The miracle baby who deserved everything because of how hard you'd fought to have me. And instead of being grateful, I became entitled. Instead of appreciating your sacrifices, I expected them. You gave me everything, so I learned to take everything. And when you finally stopped giving, I couldn't understand why. Because in my mind, your job was to provide and my job was to receive. When someone finally speaks the truth you've been waiting years to hear, why does it hurt more than the lies ever did?" "I was a terrible mother," I said quietly. "No," Isabella started. "Yes. I enabled you. Taught you terrible lessons. Confused love with indulgence. Made you the center of my universe until you thought the universe actually revolved around you. I created the monster and then acted surprised when it bit me." Linda intervened gently. "Mrs. Voss, can I challenge that? You were a mother who loved your child deeply. The choices you made came from love, even if they had unintended consequences. Isabella made her own choices as an adult. You didn't forge those signatures. You didn't create the fake company. You didn't manipulate yourself. She did those things. And while your parenting may have contributed to her sense of entitlement, it didn't make her commit fraud." "She's right, Mother." Isabella wiped her eyes. "I made my choices. Jason made his choices. We hurt you deliberately, repeatedly, and then blamed you for finally protecting yourself. That's on us. Not on you." We sat in silence for a moment. The tissue box between us looked inadequate for the tears that needed to be cried. Why did you call me a failure? I asked suddenly. On Mother's Day. Why those specific words? Isabella flinched. Because I wanted to hurt you. Because you told me the week before that you needed to think about the next investment. Not no, just that you needed time. And I was so angry that you dared to hesitate. So angry that you weren't immediately handing over money. So I wanted to make you feel small. Make you feel like you had to earn my respect by giving me what I wanted. It worked. I know. And I'm sorry. The apologies were getting easier for her to say. That worried me. Apologies could become performance, words said because they were expected rather than because they were felt. What do you want from me? I asked bluntly. Today, in the future, long term. What is it you want? Isabella looked at Linda again. Linda stayed quiet, letting her answer on her own. I want you to know I'm different. I want you to see that I'm trying. I want, she paused, seemed to reconsider. No. Honestly? I want my mother back. I want the relationship we had before everything fell apart. I want to call you when I have a bad day and hear you tell me it'll be okay. I want holiday dinners and birthday calls, and someday, if I ever have children, I want them to know their grandmother. I want what I destroyed. That's honest, Linda said approvingly. But I know I can't have it, Isabella continued. No, I don't deserve it. Know that trust, once broken like I broke it, maybe can't be fixed. So what I want and what I'll accept are different things. And I'll accept whatever you're willing to give. Even if that's nothing. I studied her face, looking for traces of the girl I'd raised. She was there, underneath the harder exterior, underneath the year of consequences. But she was buried deep. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger who looked like my daughter. I don't know if I can give you anything, I said honestly.